2 million years ago, something happened that should have ended us before we even began. Somewhere in the scorched, blood-drenched savannahs of East Africa, a creature did something no other had ever dared. It stood, not on instinct, not by accident. It rose to its feet with shaky legs and hollow eyes, straight into a world that wanted it dead. Its name? Primorus Gracilius. Sounds noble, right? It wasn't. It was a walking tragedy. A desperate gamble by nature that barely survived its own shadow. Primorus didn't have weapons. It didn't have fire. It didn't even have a decent scream. It had no one to protect it, no one to mourn it, and almost nothing to eat. Its life expectancy? Just 12 brutal years. That's not even long enough to develop a midlife crisis. And yet, even in those few years, it watched entire families shredded by predators. Lions in the grass, crocs in the rivers, eyes always watching, mouths always hungry. They could barely grunt, yet somehow understood the most important survival skill: run when you hear something growl. Every sunset was a coin toss. Every night, a horror story. They weren't early humans. They were a biological draft copy, the barely functional prototype in nature's most savage experiment. Can fear keep something alive long enough to evolve? When you checked your phone this morning or spilled your coffee, one of your ancestors was crouched in darkness, cold, starving, unsure if the next sound in the grass was wind or teeth. Welcome to the first age of humanity where survival wasn't a right. It was a mistake that just kept happening. Meet Primorus Gracilius. Not a warrior, not a hunter, just a twitchy, underfed scavenger with a death wish. Barely over a meter tall, weighing less than your gym bag, and looking like they borrowed their skeleton from a raccoon, they stumbled through a world ruled by monsters. That world was a buffet of nightmares. Saber-toothed beasts stalked the shadows. Packs of giant hyenas patrolled the plains. Crocodiles camouflaged themselves as rocks. Even the trees weren't safe. Leopards lounged in the branches, waiting for something tasty to pass by. Primorus wasn't a predator. It was the uninvited dinner guest, creeping toward half-eaten carcasses with nothing but a chipped rock and a prayer. Their tools were glorified paperweights sharp enough to cut meat, but completely useless when an apex predator decided it wanted seconds. Their strategy? Hope the lion's too full to notice. Hope the crocodile's napping. Hope is not a plan, but it's all they had. Half in the trees, half on the ground, always out of place. Climb too slow, get eaten, drop too fast, get ambushed. They weren't calculating. They weren't clever. They were hungry. And hunger makes you do stupid things. Like wandering into predator territory just for a sniff of rotting meat. Like chasing fish in rivers that doubled as crocodile vending machines. They didn't even like fruit. Unlike apes, they were obsessed with flesh. They had meat-tearing teeth and jaws built for destruction, but no way to kill. So, they scavenged, begged, and risked death for calories. That was the ultimate irony of Primorus Gracilius, a creature obsessed with meat, built for survival but destined to lose. Not because they were weak, but because they didn't know when to be afraid. And in a world like that, not knowing when to run is fatal. Fire didn't just cook food, it rewired our fate. It kept predators at bay, turned cold caves into defensible shelters, and perhaps most importantly, gave the early humans something new. A reason to gather, not just to eat, but to exist. The moment one of them figured out how to trap lightning in a branch, the game changed forever. If fire was the tool for survival, then teamwork was the secret weapon that flipped evolution on its head. Enter Homo Ignis, the fire wielder. And, unlike their ancestors, they didn't run alone. They moved like shadows with roles. One would flush, one would drive, one would ambush. If prey thought it could flee, it quickly learned it wasn't being hunted by beasts, but by a system. A group with strategy, with intent. And to pull that off, they needed more than strong legs. They needed memory. They needed patience. They needed to trust each other, which, for a species that just a few millennia earlier, was eating leftovers in terror was a massive leap. They also needed tools, and so they made one. The Infernum Cleaver. The Swiss army knife of the Stone Age. A weapon so absurdly well designed, it lasted over 1,000,000 years with barely a tweak. This wasn't instinct anymore. It was planning. No animal had ever done that before. These weren't panicked scavengers, they were professional killers with a game plan. They learned to cut off escape routes, read animal tracks, and follow herds across brutal terrain. They didn't wait for luck. They built success with tactics. With Homo Ignis, survival stopped being a desperate accident. It became a calculated outcome. Their rise marked the moment nature had to flinch. Because, for the first time, humans weren't reacting to the world, they were rewriting it. And then came the moment they took it even further. In a sunken, cracked wasteland of Kenya lies a place called Nakora Flats, once a lakeshore, now just baked dust and fossilized silence. But the silence tells a violent story. Beneath the surface lie the bones of Brutopithecus, a giant primate roughly the size of a gorilla, 70 kilos of muscle, bone, and pure territorial rage. Not exactly easy prey. And yet, someone killed them. Not one, not two, 90. 90 skeletons stacked like discarded logs in a space no bigger than a living room. Something had driven them there and finished them. This wasn't a flood, not a predator attack. This was a slaughter. And the killers? Homo Ignis. More than 4,700 stone tools surrounded the site, not defensive gear, but sharpened hand axes and flakes designed to end lives. What makes this more chilling? 76 of the 90 skeletons were juveniles. That's not a fluke, that's a choice. Why the young ones? Because they're easier to chase down, easier to trap, easier to kill. But there's another theory, darker, colder. Maybe this wasn't just about meat. Maybe it was about something new, power, a show of dominance, a bloody initiation. Some archaeologists believe these early humans planned the attack in waves, driving the primates toward a kill zone, boxing them in, cutting off every exit. The juveniles couldn't run, so they died first. Then came the butchering, crushed skulls, broken teeth, smashed bones scattered like someone had dropped a warhammer on a nursery. This wasn't about staying alive. It was a message. Like the headhunter tribes of more recent history, these early humans might have turned killing into a ritual, a badge of honor. Kill a Brutopithecus? You earn respect. Get sent out as a boy, and if you come back alive, you come back as something else. The massacre at Nakora Flats wasn't just a turning point in hunting, it was a turning point in thinking. No longer about survival but ceremony, strategy, identity. This was the dawn of group power, coordinated violence, and the earliest signs of something terrifyingly human, culture born in blood. What unsettled archaeologists the most at Nakora Flats wasn't how many bones they found. It was who the bones belonged to. Over 75% were infants and juveniles. And here's the disturbing part, most of the carcasses weren't even fully eaten. No burn marks, no clear evidence of long-term campfires or continuous settlement. Which led to a grim idea, maybe this wasn't about survival at all. Maybe this was about deciding who deserved to survive. Across the world, from the burning dunes of the Kalahari to the frozen silence of the Arctic, some of the oldest surviving cultures have initiation rituals where boys are sent to face deadly prey. No lectures, no exams. Just blood, risk, and bone-snapping violence. What if Homo Ignis did the same, but with less ceremony and more brutality? Imagine this. A teenage hunter sent out to kill a Brutopithecus. Not because the tribe needed dinner, but because failure meant being forgotten. Because success meant being seen. A rite of passage written in fang marks and crushed skulls. To be accepted as a man, you had to kill something stronger than you. And fear? That wasn't something you confessed. It was something you paid. If you didn't come back with a kill, no one came looking. No songs, no grave. Your name was wiped out before it was even remembered. And for the boys who watched, they learned one rule fast: only the one who drags the body home gets to tell the story. So began a new kind of system, not built on survival, built on status. Death stopped being a random tragedy and became a scheduled performance, a test, a theater of pain. And in that ritual, soaked in screams and ambition, humanity grew its first taste of something dangerously addictive: glory. But glory had a cost, and Australia was about to make that very clear. When Homo sapiens first arrived in ancient Australia around 50,000 years ago, they didn't find paradise. They walked straight into a living horror show. Imagine expecting kangaroos and meeting monsters instead. First came Dracolonia, a venomous lizard the size of a school bus, 7 meters long, weighing over a ton, and equipped with blood-thinning venom. One bite didn't kill instantly. It just made you leak slowly, helplessly, until your organs gave up. Then there was Raptidile, a land-running crocodile with the soul of a predator and the speed of a sprinter. No slithering, no lurking. It ran. 4 muscled limbs launched it forward, jaws open, teeth serrated like hacksaws. Not a warning, just impact. Next, Gorvin, a prehistoric serpent that couldn't swallow you whole, so it tore you apart instead. With rows of backward-hooked teeth, it ripped chunks of flesh while bone snapped like dry twigs. One strike, then another, then silence. And just when you thought it couldn't get worse, there was Marnock, the marsupial lion. It didn't growl, it didn't stalk for long. It just waited, and when the time was right, it bit once. That's all it needed. Strongest bite force of any mammal in history. One crunch, no chase, just a clean ending. Now picture yourself, early Homo sapien. You've crossed oceans. You're holding a stick carved into a spear. No guns, no shelter, and you're surrounded by creatures who've never lost a fight. You don't get second chances. There are no oops moments. One wrong sound, a snap of a twig, a rustle of grass, and you're nothing more than lunch. A cracked branch above your head? That wasn't the wind. That was Thaleo, crouched in the trees, waiting to pounce. A ripple on the lake? Not a breeze, Wunami was there. A prehistoric killer just beneath the surface, waiting for you to lean in for a sip. This wasn't a hunting ground. It was a rigged arena. Every shadow hid something faster. Every sound could be your last. One slip and your entire bloodline ended with your scream. And yet, somehow, we made it. Not because we were the strongest, but because we knew when to run, when to wait, and most importantly, when to remember. Survival wasn't just instinct, it was art. Today, we make movies and write novels to tell our stories. But tens of thousands of years ago, our ancestors used something more primal: blood, fire, and stone. Inside the walls of Cravou Cavern in France, a shaking hand drew a single scene: a hunter, a lion, and a moment that didn't need words. No ink, no grammar, just a message scratched into stone. I went. I hunted. I lived. Back then, a successful hunt didn't just fill your stomach, it raised your status. It wrote your name into the memory of the tribe. The ones who killed lions were remembered. The ones who brought down monsters, they became legends. And the ones who failed left nothing behind. No legacy, no children, just silence. From danger, we built hierarchy. From blood, we carved ritual. Hunting was never just a job, it was the beginning of identity, the birth of social roles, the origin of respect. It birthed the idea that some people mattered more than others not because of what they said, but because of what they survived. And our ancestors didn't just kill animals, they trapped time. Every painted bison on a cave wall, every myth told beside a fire, was a memory someone refused to let die. The beasts they fought? Gone. Dracolania, extinct. Brutopithecus, vanished. Raptidile, nothing but teeth and stone. But the one creature that shouldn't have made it? The small one. The one with no claws, No armor, no venom, just a brain and the will to keep going. Us. We survived not by brute strength, but by knowing that every failed hunt held a lesson. Every scar held a story. And every close call taught us one thing: don't make the same mistake twice. If the rest of nature was a tragedy written in tooth marks, humans were the only ones who took that tragedy and turned it into a masterpiece. And we're still here, still telling that story. We may not fight megalania anymore. We don't leap into trees to avoid being eaten. But the survival game? It never ended. We just changed the battleground. Today, we run from deadlines instead of predators. We hunt for promotions instead of meat. And we tell stories not with soot on stone, but pixels on screens. But one thing hasn't changed. Only those who adapt survive. Only those who remember where we came from know where we're going. So if something in this story sparks something in you, if the echo of our past makes you wonder what else we've forgotten, don't let that curiosity die. Subscribe now. There are still ancient truths buried beneath the surface, and we'll uncover them the only way that's ever worked. Together, through the language of survival.